Hey, what's up you guys? Today I'm doing my March wrap up. So normally I only read physical novels, but this month it's been kind of weird. I've read a short story, a children's book, manga, an ebook which was self-published, which I'm really excited to tell you about. What else? Poems. I've just read about everything. So quite excited to get into it. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe. It means a lot, and let's just get straight into things. So the first book that I read in March was Stancliffe's Hotel by Charlotte Bronte. This is part of her juvenilia and it's set in her fictional world of Angria. It was written in 1838 but not published until 2003, and it was one of the last tales in her Angria saga that she wrote with her siblings for fun. The Bronte siblings, the three sisters and Branwell, I think that's his name, just wrote these like kind of to practice their writing when they were younger. So she never actually planned to publish them. Because of this, it's a very confusing read and it doesn't actually have much of a plot. The story basically just follows a man who goes to the Stancliffe Hotel, meets an old friend, and then the two of them kind of go around the town and just meet different people. I honestly can't recommend this to anyone who isn't actually a Bronte fan. I really like the Bronte sisters. That's why I read this, because I just was interested in kind of their like younger previous works. But if you're not like a big fan of the Brontes, it's definitely not something you should just read for the sake of it, because on its own it doesn't really have much merit. I did enjoy seeing some early writings by Charlotte, but yeah, it's a weird one. It's definitely not one that I could actually really recommend to people. Next, I read The Leath of Heaven by Ursula K. Le Guin, and this was a sci-fi book that was published in 1971, and I think this is my new favourite book of 2020 so far. I absolutely loved it. So in this book, a man is referred to a sleep therapist because he's caught abusing drugs to stop him from dreaming. When he dreams, he can actually change reality, but nobody knows it apart from him. He can remember the previous reality and the new reality, like he has memories from the past of the new reality, if that makes sense. So his therapist realizes that if he is in the room while this man dreams and changes things, the therapist can also keep his old memories and his new memories. So he starts to basically hypnotize the man and make him see specific things in his dreams to influence the real world and create a better world for the therapist, but also just a better world in general. But obviously things start to spiral out of control, as you would expect. So this is a very, very clever book. It doesn't directly spell things out to you. You really have to like pay attention to all the little details and like piece together the different things, like the different realities when they've switched, what things from the previous reality caused the new reality to come into existence. And it also deals with a lot of really serious topics such as race and racism, illness, war, and obviously like the age-old question of can man play God. And I just thought this was a really, really clever book. I absolutely loved it. I'm really excited to read another book by her. I'm reading one in April and I just loved it so much. It was definitely like my favourite of 2020 and I recommend it to absolutely everyone. Even if you're not super into sci-fi, there's parts where it's a little bit, you know how in sci-fi books they kind of get a little bit too technical? That happens occasionally, but it's not like a big thing, and yeah, I just think it's a really, really good book that everyone should read. Next, I read To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf, which was published in 1927, and it follows a family who take two separate trips to the Isle of Skye, which is in Scotland. The first one is in 1910 and then again in 1920, and it just kind of shows the passing of time and how time has affected this family. So this is my first time reading a Virginia Woolf book, and I read it as part of Shannon, whose channel is 155 books. She done an International Women's Day readathon, but sadly I didn't actually really enjoy it. It was the definition of flowery writing for a start, which I don't mind sometimes, but there was very little plot for me to kind of like be invested in. I kind of need like a mix of both. So it was very, very character driven, which again, I don't mind, but I need some plot, and this just didn't have any plot, to be honest. Also, the dialogue wasn't written in the typical way the dialogue is written in books, with like, you know, a paragraph and like speech marks. This was all just integrated into like larger paragraphs. It was kind of written as like stream of consciousness, I'm pretty sure is what it's called. And it made it a little more difficult to read, and I just didn't enjoy reading it. Honestly, nothing much really happens for the majority of the book, and I was actually really glad to be done with it. It's really short, and I thought it would take me like just a couple of days to read. Like originally I wanted to just read it in one day for Shannon's readathon, but it took me like 4 or 5 days I think, and yeah, I was glad to be done with it. I still want to read Mrs. Dalloway, but this was not a great first try at Virginia Woolf, sadly. Next, because I was going into a little bit of a reading slump, I decided to pick up Georgie's Marvellous Medicine by Roald Dahl, which is a children's book that was released in 1981, and I'm sure you've all heard of it. It's like kind of a children's classic. It's very short and it's about a young boy, George, who decides to make a medicine for his abusive grandma out of basically every single liquid and substance and like pill that he can find in his house, in his garage. They live on a farm, so he puts like animal medicine in everything, and obviously it does not end well for her. I just picked this up because I wanted something kind of fun and easy after Virginia Woolf, and I really enjoyed it. It's basically you sit and read it in one sitting. It took me like 15-20 minutes, but it's just like a really fun, silly story that everyone should pick up, I think, especially if you have young children. Like it's kind of dark. It's really dark, but like it's fun. I enjoyed it. So next I read Death Note Volume 2, and this was a reread for me. Originally I read this manga series back in 2010, and then I reread Volume 1 last year, but I never continued for some reason. It was created by Sugami Oba and Takeshi Obata, I hope I'm saying that right. And I was still in a little bit of slump at this point in the month, so I wanted something that was kind of like fun and easy again, like George's Marvelous Medicine. And I know I'd enjoy reading this. So the basic premise of this anime and manga is that Light Yagami is a student who finds a death note which when you write someone's name in it, they die like 40 seconds later. And he decides to use this to kind of rid the world of criminals and make a better world. So obviously the power starts to go to his head. And in this volume, it's about the police kind of narrowing down their search, and they know the general location of where the killer of all these people, these criminals all over the world, they've kind of narrowed it down to being in this area of Japan. So I really enjoyed it again. Like I said, it's a reread. This is my favourite like kind of manga and anime series, but I've not actually read or watched that many, so that doesn't really mean much, but it's just really, really good. I feel like everyone who's into like anime and manga has already read this and seen it. Like it's definitely a classic in like the manga genre. I don't know if manga is a genre. But yeah, highly recommend this series, and it was fun. It was a nice fun read. Death at Dawn by Gabrielle Gray was published in 2020, and this was my first time reading a self-published book. I was given a copy by the author in exchange for an honest review, and I can honestly just say that Gabrielle, the author, is so nice. We had like some technical difficulties because I was trying to get this onto my Kindle, which I hadn't used in like 6 years, but she was just so nice about it all. So I just want to put that out there. So this is a high fantasy book which follows different family members of the ruling families of this world. Everyone is like competing for power. There's a lot of secret plotting. There's a lot of backstabbing and like distrust, even between like son and father and mother and daughter. Like no one really trusts each other. So I was a little apprehensive at first about following so many different characters, because I think that different narratives can sometimes, I don't know, like something just doesn't work, but it worked really well in this book. So every single character was really, really unique, and their stories were all really interesting. There was never any character who, when it was their chapter came up, I was like, oh, I kind of want to skip this. Like, I honestly enjoyed every single character's perspective. Every character as well, and every side character, they were all really fleshed out, and I was really invested in all of their stories. So my favourite was Alice, and I just could not wait to like get to her next chapter, because her story was like the most heartbreaking, but also like the most interesting. Like I just really enjoyed following her. The world set up in this book is huge, but it's never confusing. There's a lot of like lore and kind of history and stuff. It doesn't really matter that much, so you don't need to follow it. It's just like interesting little like tidbits and like kind of world building that I really enjoy. I love like good world building. Also, this is a very, very adult book, so it's a very dark fantasy. There's a lot of violence, there's a lot of murder, there's a lot of like sexual assault, but it's never in like an offensive or explicit manner. Everything kind of makes sense within the world and within the story, and it's never like glamorized, which I feel like can sometimes happen in fantasy stories. Like the violence and stuff is kind of glamorized, but it never was like that in this. Like there's a lot of it, but it was always like it had a point to it. Racism and sexism are also really explored well within this book, and I thought they were handled really well. The author herself is a black woman, I'm pretty sure, and you can tell that a lot of thought went into kind of putting this like subtext into the story, and I really enjoyed it. I'm really glad I tried this. It was my first time reading a self-published book, but I can't wait to see what happens next in this series. So please definitely check this out, check out this author and support. Next, I read The Strings of Murder by Oscar de Murillo, and this is the first book in the Frey and McGray series, which is set in 1880s Edinburgh. They are detective mystery books with a like kind of supernatural twist to them, And I have read a series all of order. I've talked about it quite a few times in this on my channel. But I read book 2 and then book 4 and then book 5 and I went back to book 1. But I actually thought it worked really well reading this as kind of a prequel and like seeing the two detectives meet for the first time, and I just thought it like worked. Like I don't think you need to read these in order, to be honest. I was sent this book by Graham, whose channel is The Archive, because he heard me talking about reading the 5th one and how I hadn't had the first one, and he was going to unhaul it, so he sent it to me. So thank you again, Graham, and I will link his channel down below. So this story is much more simple than future entries in the series, but not in a bad way. I actually really enjoyed it. I actually think that book 5 was a little too convoluted. That was my least favourite I've read so far. I just think it was getting a bit too not crazy, but I don't know. But basically this book is book 1. I really enjoyed it. It is about the detectives trying to work out who is murdering all of these violin players in Edinburgh, and of course there's, like what I said at the start, a supernatural kind of twist, or is there? And every character in this story is just so unique. There's a lot of good like character moments in the whole series, and like I said, seeing the two detectives meet for the first time was really great and I really enjoyed it. I highly recommend this story and this series to anyone who likes mystery books, because they're just really fun and they're set in Scotland. So yeah, definitely glad I picked this up, and it wasn't my favourite in the series still, but it was good. It was a good entry. The Crucible by Arthur Miller is a play written in 1953 about the Salem witch trials, and this was a reread for me. I read this in English class back in 2015, I think, and the story's just always stuck with me. I really enjoyed it back in school, so I wanted to read it again just in my free time and see if I still liked it, and I did. So it is the first play I've actually read since I joined BookTube as well, and I definitely want to try some more. I know that Shannon, who I've already mentioned in this video, she's doing like a Shakespeare book every single month, so I definitely want to pick up some Shakespeare soon, I think. But anyway, this book, or this play, is so infuriating to read, but it's meant to be, because you just know that the girls who are calling like everyone witches are faking it, and you know that they're lying, and the law are so useless, and it's basically like a lost cause right from the start. The women who are accused of being witches are told that they can either confess to being witches and be put in jail for a long time, or they can say they're innocent and be hung, which makes literally no sense. Things escalate really quickly, and I think that Act 4, the final act, was like, I don't know, I loved it. I probably could have reread it like the second I finished it. There's just something about it, it's just like so emotional, and it was just so good. I know there's a lot of allegories in this to McCarthyism and like communism and stuff in the United States back in the 1940s, 1950s. But I don't really want to talk about that because I don't know that much about it. I'm not that educated, but I know that's in there. So if you are really into history, this is definitely like an interesting play to kind of relate like the historical Salem witch trials to then the 1940s and like see the allegories and stuff. But yeah, if you're apprehensive about reading plays, I highly recommend this one, because it just gets straight into the action. Like right away, you're introduced into all the characters. You know who everyone is. It's not really confusing at all, and it's quite an easy read. I read it in like 2 sittings. You probably could read it in 1, because like I said, it is a play, so it's like meant to be watched. But yeah, the characters are super interesting as well, especially considering that they're all based on real people, and it's quite interesting that after you read it, kind of looking up the real people the play is talking about, because all of their roles in the play, although they're dramatized, are actually based on like what they actually did in real life back in the Salem witch trials. So I just think it's all really interesting, especially if you're into history. So yeah, I'm glad I reread this, and I definitely want to try more plays in the future. So the last thing I want to talk about is Emily Bronte's poems, which I'm currently reading. I mentioned back in February that I'd read some Edgar Allan Poe poems, and I wanted to try some more. So like you know, I love the Bronte sisters, so I got a collection of Emily Bronte's poems. I'm kind of working my way through them. I like them more than Edgar Allan Poe's, because they're more... Edgar Allan Poe's are like kind of like horror poems, whereas Emily Bronte's are very personal. But I've read online that a lot of them are set in the fictional world. So like I talked about earlier, Charlotte Bronte had the world of Angria, and Emily Bronte had the world of Gondal, which was like her juvenilia kind of fictional fantasy world that she'd written about. and a lot of the poems are related to characters in that. But when you're actually reading them, you don't really get that until you read like the kind of information behind them that's in the back of the book. I don't know. Basically, I'm enjoying them. They're quite interesting. They're quite dark at times, and there's a lot of talk about like death and stuff like that. But yeah, definitely if you're into poetry, I recommend Emily Brontes. I'm about halfway through and I'm really enjoying it. And those were all of the books and poems and plays and short stories that I have read in March. It's been quite an interesting month, to be honest. Like I said at the start, I don't normally read all these different kind of formats, but it's been fun. I've enjoyed it. This month I'm focusing on all of my books for the Magical Readathon, so I posted my TBR for that last week, I believe. So if you haven't seen that, I'll link that down below, but those are the books I'm going to be reading in April, and I'm really looking forward to it. So if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, leave a like, and I will see you in my next one.